I'm using a sheet of paper that is suitable for painting acrylic paintings on. So the actual paper surface itself is already it's like painting on a sheet of canvas, I suppose. So it's got a slight waxiness to the surface, so it's not absorbent like watercolor paper. But equally with acrylic paintings, you can, as you know, you can use heavyweight cartridge paper, heavy or watercolor paper, anything like that will do. Because we are painting our birdie, our Avocet, and he's a light colour, or the bird is a light colour, I've already tinted the background. And we mentioned this before in acrylic painting. It's much easier for you to identify your light and your dark tones if you pre-tint your background. It just makes it much easier for you to see your colours and to see your lights and your darks. So while you're learning about acrylics, I really recommend you get into the habit, even if it's in your sketchbook, just do a light tea wash. It can be very rough. You can see my background is very patchy. Okay. It doesn't need to be perfect, as long as it just gets rid of that white sheet of canvas paper for you. That's the main aim, get you started. The second thing is positioning. So if I was doing it more of a study, it's not too big at the moment, but if I was doing this as a full painting, okay, I have actually cropped into this my original photograph. And when you only have, one key feature of an object, so here we have the Avocet. If you were looking at the rule of thirds, so if you think about the golden grid, okay, you want to have when you've got a single object, it's a bit dangerous to have him splat bang in the center. So I've actually, if you're looking at the rule of thirds, I've actually offset him slightly, so he's more on this side, or she's more on this side. Okay. So and again, if you're looking at your rule of thirds, okay, the bird again is sitting on a crossway of the rule of thirds. So that would make a stronger composition if whether it was a building or what does it say? In this case, it's a seabird. Okay, so by just pushing them off center a little bit, and then trying to get some sort of focal of interest that we could make up around the bird, it makes it a more interesting composition. So the bird is slightly offset, and we've got a nice mound that the bird is resting on. So we've got this coming forward and this receding backwards, okay? So that's really useful. You could use heavier marks here or thicker consistency of paint to really emphasize the bird sitting on dried grasses and mud, dried mud that he's sitting on. And you can, that's the beauty with acrylics, is that you can apply this texture very thickly, or you could even do things like add a gesso background. Hello, Anne. Add a gesso background, so you can really emphasize nice thick consistency if you so want to. All right, and then this will be slightly smoother in the background, and we could push it back even visually even further by making it perhaps slightly duller or more muted color. So then, and bringing it forward, this will sort of emphasize the lightness of it. There we are. So you can see the focus that we've got for the bird. So to get ourselves warmed up, how about we start blocking in some of the background with a nice big brush. And I have on my palette, I've got some titanium white, some raw umber, and some raw sienna. And that is how I have achieved my neutral biscuity tone. So I'm just going to pick up some little tidbits of paint just to get us warmed up. And we're just going to do some sweeps left to right. Okay. So what you can start to do is do some patches underneath the bird. Very rough, okay. And then you can go back at them, just so we start to get some of this roughness going on. But that's probably a bit too white, so I'm going to pick up a bit more colour. So just very loose, very free, just picking some bits up. Okay. But that's too cold, so I'm going to pick up some more raw sienna. Because we've got quite a detailed looking bird, I think if you sometimes I quite find it's quite useful just to do a bit of the background first, or to do you know, because we know we've got to do some finer details on the bird. If we just enjoy having some loose swipes left to right, it just sort of warms things up a bit. And because, you know, we're warming up because we are being free with our brush marks. Okay, I'm not caring too much, but I've noticed that there's some patchiness in my painting. Look, you can even blend on the page if you wanted to. Look, and oh, just notice you can't see what I'm doing. One other thing to note is that depending on your acrylic, sometimes they do tend to dry darker. So just something to think about. Okay, so well, it's just very milky tones there. It's all quite smooth at the moment. I'm not trying to do anything too rough yet. Just a way of warming up, really. And now I'm going to do the background a bit. And because I want to knock it back and add a bit of colour for interest, I'm going to add a smear of blue, I think. So I'm looking at the background behind the bird. Isn't that nice little, I don't know, coffee mocha colour, isn't it? So what I'm doing is I am picking up the tiniest smidge of burnt sienna and a Prussian blue or dark blue to get that nice mocha tone. There you go. And that's gone a bit dark. So what I'm going to do is go back again. Just lift that just a smidge. Yeah, that's better. So I'm just scribbling this in with my filbert brush. It can be a thin wash. Just in all directions, because it is a very rough background, so by doing all of this we're sort of emphasising it. And then we can going around the edge of the bird. So I've hardly got any paint left on my brush, so I'm just really sort of just darkening it down. This is the beauty with acrylics. You can just scribble shear marks all over it, okay, until you're beginning to find out what's going on. And because I was using a big brush, you can see I've not gone close to the bird, although it doesn't matter too much if you go over the edge. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change to a smaller brush because this one's quite a big one, look. So let's go down to the smaller brush. I'm still working with a chisel brush at the moment. Okay, it's quite a small one. What's really useful about this brush is that you can cut in to the edge like this. So what I'm doing now is I'm picking up the background colour again, which was a bit of burnt sienna and a bit of navy blue. So you could use burnt umber in anything that's sort of that nice and mockery colour. If you think it's too cold, you can warm it up. But this one I think is looking quite greyish on the outside. Warm it up a smidge. I don't want to spend too long on the background, so the background's going to be really rough because we need to concentrate on the bird. So it's things like this when you spot it. So I've just noticed that there's a twig and some grasses or whatever. So you could reposition those, but just while you're warming up, it's just nice to sort of put the occasional spike in, so it sort of jogs your memory as to what's where in this real rough state. So I'm blending it all, and you could use your fingers. Oh look, I've just done that with my fingernail. That makes a really nice blade of grass or twig. Because this paint is wet, you can scratch it with your fingernail and you can get some really nice straw marks. So there you go, that's something to bear in mind when you're thinking about things. Is, do I want to have some sort of scratch marks? And get some really nice textures going. So this is a lighter patch here, so that's roughly the colour that's around the bird. I just need to go closer down to the chest. This is going to really help us by getting these background tones and getting them tonally around the sort of depth that we need. Okay, doesn't really matter too much about this background yet. It's still quite it does, I'm deliberately trying to make this background very rough by putting my brush, the brushes that I have are going around in all directions, just to make sure that the background stays as rough as I possibly can. Okay. So that is as far as I've got so far. But I'm not worried. I'm probably going to learn. I'm not going to finish this bit up at the top here. I'm just going to concentrate on this area around here. So we're going to need to do the tail around the back here, which is a similar colour to this colour over here. Okay. I'm trying to get some scratchy marks around here, around the tail. So don't be afraid. You can blend patches of colour on your board, and I'm using scratching with my fingernail. So I put the paint on wet, and I can almost immediately scratch through it, and I can get some really nice, coarse textures. So, you know, we're using a bit of our imagination, I suppose, but it can help us sort of work out that there's lots of roughness going on behind the bird, because we're not really sure what's going on, but it's all rough. Okay. You do what you feel you know works, but that's what I'm roughly doing. I may change it, but that's the beauty of acrylics, is that this is just the first layer that we're applying at the moment. We can change it as the composition and the bird painting develops. So, you know, there's a point where you're using the colors and you're using your reference photo as a guide, but then there's a point where you can forget about the photo and just enjoy doing some marks on your painting. So I'm not going to do much more background now. It's an initial start. We may add more detail to it and change it, but it was just, I think it's a really good way of warming up when you're painting, is to say, right, first 10 minutes I'm just gonna roughly block in some patches of colours and, you know, explore my mark making and enjoy doing, you know, ziggy-zaggy marks and sketching with my paintbrush. And I think because you know, I don't know about yourselves, but for me, I find that it gives me more confidence, because I feel more relaxed about my painting, because I know this is a rough. You know, I've got loads of time. I can build my layers. So it's just a rough starter for 10 that I'm just putting on, just to give me a feel for it, and I don't need to panic, because if I've made a mistake or if I've decided that there's something I don't like about this painting, I can paint over it and it will disappear. So for a moment, this great big blade is showing up as really being quite dominant at the moment. So I may decide, well, do you know what, I'm going to shave that down and make that thinner, and I've got another couple of blades to put over here which will break it up. So that's something that you may decide as your painting develops. I don't like these grasses at all, so I don't like them, so I'm just going to get rid of them all. So there's all sorts of things to think about when you're developing your painting. Okay, so if you have all, so you can see it's really rough. Okay, and if, especially if you see on the right hand side, you can see how cool my hand looks. Okay, until it goes to the centre. Hopefully that will give you an indication as to the colours are much cooler on the sides. So you're generally looking at cool biscuity tones. So what we're going to do now is we are going to go down to a small brush, and we're going to put in some dark tones first, and then we'll put the light tones of the bird in afterwards, and then we'll probably change our water for that, because otherwise the white feathers won't look white anymore. Okay, so I'm going down to a small brush. As you know, with my training, when I went to university, I was told thou shalt not use black, but we have a black bird. So what you can do, and use black paint, okay, but what we do need to probably bear in mind, so if you've got a little bit of scrap paper or your sketchbook, so if you get the sketchbook down, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about blacks. So this is black paint. I'll just do it in little patches because this is camera work, and the colour changes that I'm talking to you about are so subtle, you may not be able to pick this up on camera. A great example of this, I suppose, is if I was painting a black dog. Okay, say I had a black Labrador, okay, and I wanted to paint his portrait. I wouldn't really consider using black paint. The reason why is black, or the main reason is the black paint tends to deaden everything, and it dries really flat, so it's a bit lifeless, I suppose. And what I would do if I was painting a black dog is I would do an undercoat of brown. So I probably pick up a combination of burnt sienna and burnt umber. So there's my burnt sienna. We'll probably have to wait a few minutes for this to dry and do its job. So if I make this a dark sienna colour, so there you go. So there's my dark sienna. There's my brown. Okay. So looking very much like a conker brown. And because I want to get more, so because I want to have more life in the animal or in the feathers, it can be beneficial, depending on the light of it, to do one colour on one and then another colour on the top. So now that I've done that colour, and then once that is dry, this brown colour, I would then put a bluish tone over the top, and the brown underneath and the blue on the top. Together the two will make a black. So there's my blue going over the top of my brown, making black. So the advantage to this is that with birds or with wildlife, sometimes in the feathers, although the feathers are black, sometimes you'll see a bluish undertone or greenish undertone. Or with black Labradors, the animal is, although the animal looks black, lots of Labradors are actually very deep brown, but in the light, for some reason, it makes them look black to the pigmentation. So you'll get a more richness, or more, or a better finish it's difficult for you to appreciate on the camera. You'll get a better finish if you do an undertone of this lovely burnt sienna tone underneath, and then you'll put this bluish colour on the top and show the blue. So that's just something to bear in mind. You might find that there's more, but there's more depth because there's an under. You can see a hint of the sienna underneath. There's more depth to the black here, where this, it's just completely flat as a pancake. It just looks straight down. There's no movement to it. So this Avocet that we're looking at, and in the reference that I've got, and I've also got it on my computer screen. Okay, it's it's a very true black, and it looks very cold. But I can see hints of greyish blue in the bill, and also his legs underneath the bird are also a chalky, powdery blue colour. So we're going to start off with some dark tones for the bird. So what I would like you to have to handy is, rather than black, I would like you to please, if you've got a dark brown colour, I'd like you to start looking at that. So I'm going to do some hints of blue on the neck here, and then we're going to do some hints of brown down there. Okay, so I'm going to pick up my small brush. So this colour that I've got is a Prussian blue, or so if you don't have it, you could have a navy blue, okay, and just add a bit of brown to it. So just to make it a bit more like a night sky. Okay, so I'm going to paint this here on the bird. Okay. The paint's not very thick, but note all the marks that I'm making. Okay, I am going in the direction of the bird. So the structure of the feathers, and if I tap it, I'm already getting some textures coming down. Okay, so at the moment this doesn't look black, it looks sort of a dirty blue colour. It doesn't have to be thick yet, it just needs to be a thin layer. Okay, don't worry about it too much, don't worry about the patchiness, because it will be having a second layer over the top, and then we can go up in consistency a little bit. If it's a little bit thicker, it can be fine. But at the moment I'm trying to keep it very strong. I'm trying to come into the shot here. There we go. And then I'm going to go on the shoulder here, on the bird's wing. So this colour that I've got is like an indigo blue, it's not black. Although looking at the camera, it does look quite black. All I would say is all your brush marks should be following, the feathers should be all going in the direction of the bird. So hence why I've been going up and then following the neck down and then following the shoulder across. Okay, and now I'm sweeping this way. So when I start to do my brush marks, I'm always trying to follow the structure. So for this corner here, for the tail, I'm pulling along and I'm pulling it down and then I'm flicking it up. So I get a really lovely, edge. So I'm now picking up some more of this blue and I'm going to paint it on the beak, and I might actually lighten a little bit of it with a little bit of white so it almost looks like a grey colour. I just want to try and eke out some colour into this lovely bird. Going to the base. Oops, that's too wet. So this, just blobbing that out. So the paint that I'm applying is I'm using the water, remember, for just cleaning my brush with. So the paint on my brush is very dry and it's just well loaded with paint. So the consistency is quite strong. So we're going to have to bear in mind where the eye is. And I'll talk about that in a minute. In this painting, so when you're doing animals' eyes or eyes in general, this bird has a very black eye. Okay. When it comes to doing eyes, just as I was talking about with the fur, you tend to, even though the eyes are quite dark and can be quite black, I would potentially do an underlayer of burnt sienna for an eye, and then I would put the bluish tones over the top. So I get a richer glow to the eye rather than using black paint, because black just tends to kill things so dramatically. Okay, so depending on how your work develops, there's nothing to stop you introducing a bit of black paint as well, but I would say at the moment I'm not using any black paint at all. At the moment I'm using a bluish tone, and then I'm going to be cooling it down. It's amazing how I think once you get the mid-tones on, how much lighter this bird is looking. We haven't actually put the white paint on it yet, and already we can see it's a light coloured bird. So I'm now going to paint the leg underneath here. So what I will be doing is picking up that Prussian blue. If you don't have Prussian blue, you could use a navy blue and then just grey it down. Okay. In actual fact, that's the other leg there. And now, while this paint is still wet, I am going to pick up some dark paint. So this is how you can do blending. I've just put this blue on, which is too light, and now I'm using a darker grey, and the same with here. Okay. and I can drag one colour into another. I just wash this out a bit more. That's better. So there we go. Take a bit more highlight. Now I'm blending the two together. So we've got that bit going there. And we've got that. I'll probably do that afterwards. Right, okay, so if you have all, and we've got a shadow here, which we need to put in. And we'll put some grey tones down there. So the other colour that I can do, so what I would like you to all to do is to change your water, and we're now going to be painting the white. Okay, so make sure you've got clean water. So we have a white bird, but we need to make him look to look three-dimensional. And we can see that there's a greyish shadow cast on the chest here, the breast here, and underneath the wing. And the transition between the white and the blue is quite smooth. So that tells me that we're going to need to use pure white paint around the edge, and then we're going to need to darken it slightly, just like in this area here where I've been smudging. So what we're going to be doing, because it all looks fairly smooth, we're going to need to blend one colour into another. So in this area, we are going to be having like a powdery greyish blue colour, okay, where we can see it in the greyness of the bird. And then we're going to have some pure white tone around the edge there. There should probably also be a shadow, yes, underneath the chin or underneath the bill. So we're going to need to have the shadow cast dark underneath there, a bit of darkness over there, so we can make sure we keep the whiteness to the edge. Okay, so if it's a cooler day today, but we're going to obviously be doing this bird quite rough. If you wanted to do this as a more professional finish or more detailed finish, because you're doing wet and wet, and as I say, with feathers or with fur, you have to do your blending with wet on wet. You can also extend that blending or by using a blending medium. So what I would like you to do, please, is make sure you've got some pure white, and then we need another little patch of paint, which is going to be a neutral grey tone, a bluish grey tone. So that's what we can see in the feathers. So we need a pure white on our palette and an off-white. It may even be beneficial for you to have two brushes. I do tend to pick up one, but speed, I suppose we could do that as well. So you can have one brush for each colour. So I'm starting off with the greyish tone, which seems to be more on the chest. It's not quite so cold underneath the bill, so I might change the grey and add a bit more brown into it. It looks more bluish grey down the bottom here and also in this area here. Okay, so I am putting on my bluish tone like this, and then I'm picking up my white. And then I'm going to get a dry brush so I can shade between the two. I'm going to be very gradually adding more. And because with this paint's quite dry, I'm flicking it outwards, okay, so I can get the texture, and I'm beginning to get a little bit of highlight on that breast there. Okay, and then it goes back to white again. So down here it's darker. So I'll emphasize this just for the camera. And then we've got a darker tone here and down here. It's all okay. And now I'm picking up my white paint. Okay, and I just need to go up down the top around there. Notice again, all my brushworks, or all my marks that I'm making, are following the bird. So I'm following the wings. All my marks that I'm making are all in a shallow diagonal, following the wing of the bird. So again, where the bird's sitting, we're getting some shadow underneath the bird. So underneath the bird, we want to contaminate this white. It needs to be a slightly off colour, okay, slightly cooler tone. So a muddy, slightly brownish, coolish tone to show that the bird's sitting, to give us that cool tone. And again here it's quite greyish there. So this is what really helps us when we're starting to do our painting. Okay, here is glowing much brighter because this is where the pure white is, and here I've got thinner white paint, so a little bit of the background is showing through. And down here, this is all the greyish tones that I've got, and the foot. And then I've just roughly put in just an off tone here. So that means, and it's brighter here because I've got stronger white paint, whereas here the white paint's thinner. So that's how we start to build up a three-dimensional feel for this bird that we're painting. Okay, so it's by doing these subtle blendings. We need to put a little bit more shadow underneath here, and we're going to obviously put another layer on top of this to make this more of a jet black color. If you really wanted to emphasize it when you're just studying birds in general, just as we were thinking about the clouds, if you wanted to show sunlight hitting a bird, a white bird, you might, depending on the lighting of it, you might consider, I really want to make this whiter than white, or cool white. So if you add, you know, just the merest hint, as I say, with the clouds, I was talking about adding a merest speck of yellow on it to make it really shine and really glow. But we don't need to in the case for this study, because it's very much a cool bird that we're looking at. All right. But all I'm trying to do is really try and emphasize the lights and the darks to really try and make it look really strong and three-dimensional. So hopefully you can see here that this area of paint here is blue rather than black. Well, like a dark navy blue, or than a black, because black does tend to kill. You can see that in the eye there. Look, it's very flat, and so that's why we need to try and eke out as much colour as we can to make it a bit more alive looking. So now that we have this blue undertone, we can put our brown over the top, or we can even just probably apply. You can do patches of it in the brown and patches of it in the same tone again. So we're getting a more a light colour. So it's looking cooler on the neck. What I think I'm probably going to do actually is do brownish tones on here, and up here I'm going to do it cooler. So I'm not using black paint, I hasten to add. So it's but it's off black, so it just gives it more life, I suppose, because I've got more blue undertones in this black. It's going to make this bird more lifelike. Okay, so I've gone down to a really small brush. It's a really fine one. And I'm going to start with the bill. This very, very fine bill. So, because this bird is sitting down, if we could just paint this bill black, but then obviously it just the bill would always just look flat. Okay, but you want to suggest the merest hint of three-dimensional form on it. We need to make the bill slightly lighter on the top, and then have the bill darker underneath, because the underneath of the bill is in shadow, isn't it? Whereas you've got the sunlight coming from above. So your darkest tone, or your black, your nearest damn it black colour, should be underneath. Okay. And just drag with your hand underneath. Don't worry if your bill looks a bit shaky or you don't get a nice crisp edge. Because this is acrylic, you could use, I don't know if that Penny wants to do, but if I just paint this in, okay, because this background isn't finished, we can paint up to the edge of the bill. Okay. And now I'm going to get my colour that's lighter. Now you might find it easier for you to tilt your board for doing the bill. I'll keep it still for me, so it's going to be more difficult for me. But I highly recommend that you consider twisting your board a little bit, just to make it a bit easier for you to do. Now, I don't know whether you can see that, but this actually comes on this flat here at the top. You may not be able to pick it up on camera, but I'll try and hold it up in a minute. So this is looking messy at the end here. So what I'm going to do is I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to... Nope, do that. So that's too light. So what we can do is go over the top. You'll find it more beneficial to have your paint thinner, I suppose. You'll find it easier to get a softer edge. Look down. There we go, that's beginning to get better. Now I can pick up my dark colour. So I'm resting my hand on my painting. So I've got nicely here, so I'm sweeping with my hold down and really resting it on the page. So I've got a nice build. This is looking a bit shaky here, but what we can do, okay, is get the edge the way you want it. So this is looking a little bit tatty here. So what we're going to do is we will be using a background colour to smooth this bit out, so we get it really nice and perfect the way you want it. And because I've got this dark colour, I'm just going to go around the eye and then up. And I'm deliberate, if you notice, I'm deliberately tapping or following the bird around. I'm not trying to paint it smooth because, I want to keep the texture of the feathers the way that it's travelling up. So now that I'm travelling up, I'm flicking up around it. And I'm just keeping that there really for me, just to remind me that there's a highlight above and below the eye. Okay. And again, because we've got the light shining on top of the bird, another tip would be, although this bird is black, if you have lighten the black at the top or make it more bluish or anything, you will get more movement. So rather than having the whole head exactly the same colour, think about perhaps putting occasional bit of lighter colour on the top so that it gives it more movement. So what I'm doing now is changing the colour slightly. So now this colour that I've got is an incredibly dark grey. And then I'm going to go back to my bluish black colour. So all the time I'm trying to follow. So it's beginning to get the depth that we need for the bird now. And I'm now beginning to come down. And I'm just tapping the edges because this isn't a smooth edge that we've got where the black blends into the white. So I'm tapping it to get that nice broken edge. But here above the wing it's smooth. So I hold my brush on its side and I use my hand and I wipe the curve with my hand, with a steady hand. So there I've got a sharp edge for the bird, but up here it's more feathered and more broken. So if you find you've got a wobbly edge here, all you need to do, and I'll show you how to do it now, is have, if you've got your Stay Wet palette and you've got a little bit of your background colour, you can just do this. Because it's so difficult and so fine, that's why you could use a black biro, or I was using, for my tracing, I was using one of these black pens. Okay, little black pen, Stay pen. Okay, so you can get the edge that you want. So if I didn't like the edge here, it's looking a bit rough, I can mix up my background colour, which is sort of an umber colour, sludgy colour, isn't it? Okay, and I can say, right, this edge on this bill is a bit too uneven. So I'm going to paint up to the edge with my chisel brush. And I'm just going to paint it again with my chisel brush to make sure I get a really lovely edge for my bill. And then I'm just going to flick that texture away. I'm going to have to turn my painting upside down. Because I've got another little wobbly edge here. So this is a chisel brush that I'm using. And I really want to just go against that, and then I'm just dragging it with my hand, just so that I can get an even finer edge for my bill. Oh, look how fine I've painted that bill, you see? But I haven't at all. I haven't done it at all. It's the background. It's the background doing its job for us. There you go, you see, look. Ah, told you there was some seeds. And now you say, right, okay, look, I've now got my patchiness back in. I could do it above and below, wherever I want it to be, okay. And then I'll just turn my picture back up again. There we go, problem solved. So now I'm happy with the shape of my bill, and I can go in with my chisel brush and we'll say, just go up against that again. We can flick up, look, let's get some texture in there. That's what nails are for. There we go. Don't like that bit there, I need to break that up a bit. Okay, that's just, yeah. Ah, there we go. This wasn't working quite right. There we go. Camouflaged away. Look at that lovely smooth sweep to the edge there. See? And then obviously you can say, right, I'm going to lift a bit of background, and I'm going to put there's a blade there, perhaps you can put that. I'm just tapping my chisel on each side, flicking it like that. There we go. There's a couple of blades there in the background, and there was a sweep there. So this brush is quite bone dry, really. I'm just giving it a rough sweep. There we go. All right. So that's how you solve your problem with your bill. Okay. So now I'm going to start just putting in some a very subtle shadow. So at the moment on my bird, this is the background. So this area's got practically no paint in this area, and I've got a lot of white paint on this area, and then obviously I've got the greyish tones going down there. But I'm hoping you can see that it's visually looking brighter on this edge here. I'm going to pick up some white, and I'm going to contaminate my white. So I'm contaminating my white with a little bit of umber and a tiny bit of grey. So it's a warm grey, whereas everywhere else is a cool grey. Okay, so let's have a look at that. So that's not dark enough, so I'm just going to bring it down a bit more. Okay, so I'm making this tone fairly neutral and fairly warm, where that's going. Put that shadow back in. And then I need to bring some highlight here. So if you look, there's a slight change of colour here, and it's lighter on the edge there. So I'm going to bring that across here and bring that down here. And so you can also, another way of blending, which is really useful, is because I want to get the feel of the feathers that I'm looking at, I am tapping with my finger to get that broken effect that we're after. Okay. So I hope you can see that effect that I'm producing. So I've got my white paint, and I'm making sure that my brush is quite dry or loaded with paint, and if I tap it and flick it, we can start to flick it out. So now, because I've got white on, this is pure white that I've got on my brush, whether it's working. I'm just going to flick a little bit across. So this is a chisel brush that I'm using. I'm now going to go over again with the feathers. And I've got a few shadow tones that I need to put in. So if I pick up my grey, and I want to suggest a shadow here. So at the moment, the colour that I'm putting on is too dark, just so you can see it. You can do the same, because we're going to be dragging the white paint over the top. It's going to give that coolness that we want. So don't panic about this colour being this sort of greyish bluish tone. Over here it seems to be more brown, so I'm going to be adding some brown to my blue to warm it up, to make it more of a warmer tone. So now I've still got this sort of greyish tone, but it's warmer. So I'm flicking it around here, again with my chisel brush, and again down around here. And then we've got another flick there, and round there. Okay, so around here it's all looking quite bluish white, but around here we've got more brown tones in the way that it's working. All right, so now I'm going to wash out my brush, and I'm going to be picking up a more rounded brush when I find it. So now I'm picking up a white, and again I'm going to go over the wing. And I'm just flicking around. So this brush that I've got, although it's well loaded with white paint, sorry. So this brush is well loaded with paint, but it's very dry. I'm using pure white paint on a dryish brush, so I don't have lots of water. So I'm trying to keep the brush marks fairly dry. So if your paint consistency is quite wet, I suggest you dry out your brush, wipe it dry, and then pick up your paint. That way you get it nice and dry. And then what we do, see where we've got these dark patches, We're now going to drag, very lightly drag over the top with the white. Very, very lightly. And what this does is, it means that we start to get movement in the plumage, because we can see the whiteness coming through, but we can also see the shadow of the grey tones underneath. So it's giving us movement in the wing of the bird. It's giving us that real subtlety in the feathers, because it's giving it more life rather than it just being a pure white wing, because we've got those grey shadow tones underneath. So now that this brush is quite dry, I can start to flick round again with the bird. There's a little bit of highlight here. So this is really dry. So what I'm trying to do, because of these grey shadows that I put in, what I was trying to do is to get the subtlety of shadow of the wing. This bit here is looking quite light, so, and that bit over here is looking good. Now I need to do a flick. So again, you can see how dry my brush is. I'm just flicking it up, pressing a bit harder, and again flicking it up. And again there, it comes to a point there. What we need to work on now is this area here. If I show it to you. This bit of the tail. You see how that's lovely tail feather or wing here stands out really nice and bright. So in order to get this to stand out looking bright, we need to have a little, look, see that little shadow there? This is where the foot is, or the leg, sorry, I should say. This is where the leg is, which is a greyish blue colour. And then this is the rear end, or the bottom end of the bird. Okay, so we need to get this tone here, the darkness here, in order for this bright whiteness to shine up. So if you look at my study at the moment, there are my legs. There's this tone I've started to suggest, but because it's all looking a bit rough and I haven't got the whiteness of it on the end yet, we need to crispen and sharpen that up. Okay, but while it's up here, can you see these greyish tones here and round the bird? So it's giving it a more feel of fluffiness to the bird. All right. So I want to warm up the tone on the tail feather, because if you think about it, it's the straw or the muddy bed that's reflecting back up into the underneath of the bird. So the shadow would be a warm shadow, whereas at the front, with the sunlight or the way the light's casting, we've got a cooler light. So this is why these tones are more of a bluish grey tone, but over here it's not looking as grey. It's looking more like the earth is reflecting up into the tail end of the bird. So we need a warmer tone. So if you get some probably even more sienna, or even a little smidge of yellow ochre, I think it might need just a tweak, the tiniest smidge, because we want to get this a nice warm greyish tone. So I'm talking a speck, because we're talking about a contaminated white that we're mixing together. So if I mix my ochre and my raw sienna together, I get quite a creamy biscuity, or quite a cream colour. and we do need to contaminate it slightly. So I'm adding the merest hint of a pale blue to it to make it a neutral tone, but it's a warm neutral tone. I'll show you the colour mix on the screen. So we need it around here. Yeah, that tone there. It will probably go a bit darker. What I'll do is I'm going to get a pencil and I'm going to highlight the edge of this for you. I'm beginning to lose it. So I've got, what have I got? There is my leg coming up. I've got that one there. That is still white there. Yes, so this is what's missing. We've got this going up to there. We've got a nearest middle one here. So this is the light bit that we need to preserve. Coming down. This is the leg that we can see. And there is the other tail feather flicking up. And there it is there. Hopefully am I not on the camera there. And there's a, oh yes, there's a tiny little tip there. And then there's another white bit there that goes with the black. There we go. So I'm redefining that edge, so hopefully you can see that. And we're going to need to do a line like that and another one like that, so it's like a crease and some stalky bits like that. So I've redefined that edge to make it a bit clearer for myself. So I'm working on this area here, and we need to make some shadow underneath that. So if you pick up your raw umber, so all these subtle tones, I'm more looking at sort of contaminated sort of biscuity tones. What I'm really trying to achieve is to get the shadow underneath here. So now I've put my shadow in first. I'm now going to go on top with my white, and I'm going to use my chisel brush again, and I'm going to pull it out like that and pull it out like that, and then pulling it round like that. I've got a nice sweep, so if you, that's better. And then we need to wipe that back. And down here it comes again. So whenever I'm doing my brush marks, now that's where it changes. So because we've got the wing, so this bit needs to flick that way. And we need to put it down that way. And that way. So now we can start to, and that way's flicking down. So because I've got a thicker consistency of paint, I'm beginning to suggest feathers in the way that it's working. We've got a lot of, and now I forget, this is where it's really useful having a little chisel brush. There's a nice little curve and then a little sharp edge. So because we've got this nice brush with this sharp edge that we can use, we can pull that round and then flick it to get the edge that we want. And we could do it again there. Up here it's looking more greyish, so I'm not going to go too mad with this white paint that I've got lots loaded on my brush. But on the back here it's looking very strong and very white. So if I just pull again with my brush down, and then I'm going to need to change to a round brush in a second, and then this bit on here looks bluish white, so I'm going to drop my chisel brush and pick up the round so I can go into here where there's a little fine mark there, like that. And we can go on the top here. I've just seen a patch of black that we need to put back in. And then on the down there, it's a bit, again, it's not pure white, it's white with a bluish grey hint to it. So I'm mixing it up using my umber and my blue to make a grey with a slight bluish tint to it. I want to try and bring out as much colour as I can into the bird. And then this bit here is all going to be bluish grey. So you go dark first with the bluish grey colour underneath, which I'm doing now, which makes it too dark, if you remember. And there could be a little bit around here. So we'd put the dark on first, that's a bit around there as well. And then we're going to put the white on over the top. It's cooler also on the top, so let's pick up a bit of my blue. Oh yeah, round here it just needs a hint of blue on here, just to give it that little hint, and then we'll put the black, some of that, yeah, a bit there. I'm just wiggling it on, a bit down here, a bit around here as well, just wiggling it on. And that needs to be probably a bit darker in tone down there. So can you see how this edge is really showing up now? So this is, needs a little bit of shading around here. So we're just going to knock it back. Just to soften that impact. I'm just going to dial that down a smidge. So again, all the colours that I'm using are the burnt umber. Got a little bit burnt sienna, but it's mainly the raw umber, sorry, which I'm contaminating sometimes with a bit of the blue, so that could make it burnt umber if you don't have raw umber. Okay, so we can start to get the shadow coming down. And don't be afraid to smudge with your finger. Look, this is how I can get, see that patch that I had. Okay, I'm blending that harsh patch away there. So my brush is quite dry, and you can rub it with your finger so you can get these subtleties that you're after. Okay, and we need to put some more black in here now. So I'm looking at the blur, and it does look very black and almost brown at the top. So on the end it's looking burnt umber. So this is burnt umber. which I'm now flicking into the bluish colour that I had before. And I'm just dragging it back. Now I'm picking up my blue colour because I want it to be really, really strong here. Again, I'm using a chisel brush at the moment, a small one, and I'm flicking it out, starting out and then dragging it down and then flicking it out. Dragging it down and just doing it. You get the little dry edge there, it seems to work really well and make it look like a really nice bird. It makes a really nice natural form. So I'm just going round, really emphasising where we've got some dark areas, so we can make that strong again there. And we want a sharp edge there, so I'm holding my chisel brush on its edge to get a really nice dark sweep around. And then on the edge here it's more brown, and then I'm again pulling it down here and here, so we get a better flick. So this brush is quite quite dry. You'll find it much easier to sort of blend feathers with a drier brush. And then let's just really get this shadow here, this bird sitting down. And then I need to get a slightly wetter brush now to go back over this wing to get a nice edge. It's difficult to do when your brush is dry. So if I scoop up my colour, and so this time I'm making sure that my acrylic paint is more buttery. Okay, with my brush, so I can go back now and rest my hand, and I can go back and just pull it round so I can get this really nice shoulder of this wing coming down. I'm going to pick up a little bit of the blue. I think the main thing is just try not to kill it. If you use pure black paint, I think when it dries you'll find that it just kills it. I don't know why it just does. You just have to be very careful. So I'm always trying to follow the structure of the bird and the way that it's flicking. So we've got a little patch like that, and then we've got some interesting bits here where it's sort of flicking into the white. So we can just tap that, and there's another bit there, and then we've got a little black patch there, and another one there. So I'm blotting and using my, this is sharp, and this is coming round in a really nice little funny little flick. So don't be afraid to use the side of your finger to get these little marks. And now again I'm tapping because I want to make sure I've got a nice feathered edge. And then the occasional sweep. So here we've got more black and we need to put in a white streak by the looks of it. Just pick that up and pull that. So we've got a sweep going into there. So I'm scratching that off with my fingernail. And there's another bit above. And then let's put that. Just pick up that blue. So you can see, because we put some layers on, we've had the brown and then we've had the blue, we've effectively got a black. We've got the density of a black paint, but because we've got these little subtleties, it's more, the bird is more lifelike. Well, that's my preference anyway. You could, you know, I think it's more successful personally the way that it works when you develop it this way. So now I'm going to work on the eye for you, which I haven't done yet, and I need to do a little bit more around the head. You need to better. Right, so here's eye. We could get rid of that bit there. So what I'm going to do is in the photograph, we can't see anything. It's a black eye. All we can see is a highlight above and below the eye, which is why I've deliberately left that little gap. So we need a really fine brush for this. And we're going to go for our yellow ochre. And we're going to go for our white. So we're going to have pretty much white with the nearest hint of, this looks like it is practically white, really, a dirty white. So just that hint of white. It could even have a little bit of raw sienna in it, but it's practically as white as you can possibly do it. You want to have your paint slightly runnier or buttery like, so you've got a nice point. What we're going to need to do is we're going to need to do a tiny mark above, a tiny mark below, and because the sun is shining from above, the top half of the eye is black with the merest hint of grey on it. We need to lift a tone to show that it's a shiny black eye, not a dead eye. So I'm mixing up a dark grey or a lighter grey, and we're just going to, just by putting this little speck on the top half of this eye there, we're giving some life to this bluish blackish eye. And then if I just go down with the blue black colour, or black, so obviously I'm going down. Oops. So I'm just going to make that a little bit, here we go. And then we can just bring that down. So I'll hold it up for you. Okay, so I've put by putting a little blob of grey on top of the black, or bluish. So remember, I've been mixing black by using umber and then obviously using that Prussian blue. Okay. So that's how I've managed to make this eye not look so dead. Okay, I could probably even get rid of a little bit of the white on the other side. Okay, it doesn't show as much as in the photograph. There's practically nothing there. So if I just tap that away. Okay. There you go. So I've deliberately, by keeping these edges a little bit rough, it suggests the feathers. Okay. So here you can really see how the white, which is where the whiteness is really puffing out the wing for us visually, and these bluish greyish tones are knocking it back, so the wing of the bird is looking more three-dimensional. Here it's not as pure white, it's white. If you remember, we contaminated it with the bluey greyness underneath, and that's what's knocking this back. And again here, look, it's very grey, so although it's looking white, I've got a greyish tone here, so it's really pushing it back. So I'm going to put a little bit of white over the top, but not much. Okay, and then we can work on the background. So I'm just sharpening up this edge here. So I'm just flicking this out here now. It's got a really nice line the way that goes. So we can just get these edges looking a bit sharper. And then we're nearly there with the bird. Okay. So we've got a little bit here, blending back in. Yeah, a little bit here, blending back in. I just need to get a better, crisper edge here. There's that little dimple on the edge. Right, so here we are with this edge. We need to sharpen. Right, let's just get that white put back in. No, that's coming up too bright. And that's another tip you can do. If something comes up bright, just give it a little tap. And that's usually enough to knock it back. You need to get that edge better. To get that edge. There, I believe. Yes, it is around there. So let's just wiggle that in. Oh yes, there we go. And it gives it a nice. And there's a little bit of highlight catching it on there. And if we just do that again, we will get the highlight again. So just pull that back. Again, always travelling where the bird's moving. Wiping that off because it was going into my black area, or bluish black area, just so I get the edge the way I want it. Right, so we're just going to spend a few minutes putting in a few more flicks of colour underneath the bird. So we've got all sorts of patches here. So what we can do is pick up some raw sienna, and you've got loads of possibilities really for this. We can just start blocking in some shapes and some colours and really just start mixing some shapes in. Usually what I try and do when I'm trying to work out a background or trying to make things look flaky is I try and simplify the tones that I can see. So we've got this colour here, haven't we, the background, and we've got a couple of sticks or splinters where the bird's sitting, and then this is disappearing into the distance. Okay, and then there's another line there. So we've still got this ugly stick in the foreground, so I need to knock that back a little bit so it's not quite so dominant for starters for 10. Okay, probably need to put another one in and another dark one across at the back, perhaps. So I'm just making random marks really. You could obviously, you know, we're running out of time now. So just by flicking a brush around, we're beginning to get nice textures going around. And obviously when I've got more, if I had more time, then obviously I'd be picking out a few things. So we've got these nice twigs that the bird's sitting on, which would be worth doing, and a few highlights and a few lines. So it'd be worth putting those in, wouldn't it? I'm using a chisel brush, twigs and splinters and shavings and whatever. Some of these twigs are flicking up into this bird, so we've got a dark twig there actually, haven't we? I'm now changed down to a really small brush, and all I'm doing is I'm just dragging and doing shallow crisscrosses. And then I'm scratching with my fingers, and a bit more around the base of the bird here. Because there's a dark shadow here to show that the bird's sitting on something. There we are, that makes it a bit better, and we would like to, just for speed, if I had some burnt sienna, I'd probably use burnt sienna. Now we need to put dark edge there, and then we'll probably do some few more lines there. Ground. Ooh, nearly on the bird. That's nearly disaster, isn't it? And there's There we go. So I think we'll probably finish in the next couple of seconds. With a little bit of high darkness around here, just to bring out that white on there. And if we just knock that out there, just because I just want to just knock a shadow into there. So that's something else I haven't told you about yet. Now that we're starting to get really warmed up with all these lovely scratchy marks, we can do thin glazes with these acrylics. And by doing a thin glaze over the top, so i.e. using your paint in a diluted way, you can still see these lovely marks that you're making, but you can still see the textures underneath. So if I want to make a hint, a warmish hint to part of my picture, so if I pick up some burnt sienna, just contaminate it slightly to take the brightness out of it, and if I dilute it with water, it's now going to behave like a watercolour painting, okay? And I can put, can you see, look, I can put a glaze on there, but I can still see all the texture, all the thingy underneath. I've overemphasised that for the sake of the camera. Okay, we don't need it as strong as that. But what I can do, okay, is just by rubbing it in or rubbing it around, I have very subtly warmed up that area. But all the textures, all these lovely mark makings that we've been making with our acrylic paints can still be seen. So that's a really good trick that you can do if you want to get very subtle hints of warmth in some areas or cool tints in others. So it's still very dry, it's not bowed. Okay, we've got cooler tones here. We've now got this nice sort of warmish blush here, and we could say, right, we're going to do another little warmish little patch down here, or, you know, all sorts of possibilities in the way that it can work for you. All right, okay. So there we are. There is our lovely Avocet painting in acrylics.